was read in was made very sort of an automatic, but it's also for so many others the same. And I'm so proud to see also here in Ottawa, in Canada, so many people who are so strongly connected both to their identity and to the state of Israel, because they see the same thing as I do. They are raised in the same way. They either go to shul, don't go to shul, they do whatever they do, but the identity is strong and solid and is there. And this is why it's also so important to see so many young people here tonight, because it's through them that we will continue this tradition. Shlomo Mansour was one of the hostages that was taken to Gaza. He was 85 years old, and he was killed by Hamas in Gaza. He survived the Parhud in Iraq, in Baghdad. That was at the time of the Second World War. Again, that was a sort of a riot against a Jewish community there. Horrific scenes that took place, that he remembered, that he wrote down in his diary, that was actually read only after his death by his family. And they came to realize that he was actually witnessing horrific hate and horror as a kid, and was slaughtered by the same horror and hate as an 85-year-old man. So, what lessons can we learn? We just had Pesach. And in Pesach, we ask ourselves, Ma nishtana? What has changed? What is changed? What is different tonight than every other night? And on that eve, I asked not Ma nishtana, what is changing. I asked Ma yishtane, what will change? And I said to myself and to the others that it's about commitment, that we have to change the way we are committed to who we are as individuals, to our community, with our Jewish heritage. It has to do with Israel. It has to do with everything that is all around us. We're speaking tonight about arts, and Shlomo Mansour used to make toys, wooden toys. So I love making things from wood, and for me that's a little commitment to say, if I'm making something, I'll be thinking of him. That's also something in a way to say, Le'olam lo od, never again. Whatever we do, we have to think that even if now on October the 7th, when we said never again, but it did happen, this horrific massacre took place, we have to continue to do whatever we can to make sure that never again is never again. Toda rabba. Thank you. Am Yisrael Chai.
This evening, we wanted to pause for a moment to honor the memory of Eli Boligraf, a beloved Holocaust survivor, known to so many of us, educator, and lifelong advocate for remembrance. Eli shared her story with thousands and thousands of students here in Ottawa and community members over the years. Her courage, warmth, and unwavering dedication to Holocaust education have left an indelible mark on Jewish Ottawa and on the broader community. Let's take a few moments to watch a short video tribute in honor of Eli.
For mankind to survive, we have to think positively. and it's very important. I think as one gets older, one can get more negative. I've seen it on other people, but it's very important to believe in the goodness of mankind. We have that innate quality to be good and to help other people. My name is Ellie Bollegraf, and I was born on September the 19th, 1940. My birth certificate reads Ellie Dwinger. I certainly learned fear, and it was instilled in me. I don't think children are naturally afraid. They're curious usually, because I was told, for example, if I was outside playing, to stay behind the hedge. And you know, I did play outside because this was a very unusual. It wasn't a normal house. It was a little hotel where people came and went. And Mrs. Wetzels, the lady, mother of the brood of children, she was also required to cook in the kitchen. And I often therefore spent time in the kitchen with her, and I played with the boys outside. It was very difficult to confine a child, to confine one. And I remember when the boys went to get sugar cubes from the Germans that sat in the valley against a barn. I remember that clearly. I was told not to come out of from the hedge. I could peer through. And then when they reappeared, they would share the sugar cubes with me. I definitely learned fear. The people that are going to be studying this or have studied what happened, they don't have a direct emotional connection, generally speaking, except, of course, I suppose, Jewish people. But it's very important for people to understand, to learn about what happened to ordinary people who have committed no crimes of any sort, who look physically just like everyone else. Therefore, why isolate them and label them or think evil of them? It is just preposterous that people can do these things to each other. And I find it extremely important that children are aware. I think 75% of the kids, at least, that I speak to at school come from war-torn countries, and we have to be sensitive to people that are different from ourselves. And we have to understand that they came with baggage, and they will have to be integrated. And the fact they have dark hair or wear head covering doesn't make them evil. It is a mode of dress. And people should understand that they shouldn't be looking at the exterior package, but rather decide whether someone has a good personality. And that is what's important.
We now move to one of the most meaningful parts of this ceremony, the candle lighting. Each candle we light tonight holds the weight of memory. These flames will symbolize the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust and reflect our collective commitment to never forget. Each survivor will be accompanied by Ottawa Jewish Community School students, Lily Levine, Alma Oleg, Yuli Smolensky, Noah Patel, Sophia Bilak, and Abby Presner. The biographies will be read by Torah Day student Yedid Bitzan.
Judith Bayland. Judith Bayland, born as Judith Sazgal, was born on December 25th, 1943, in Budapest, Hungary. Her father, Rudolf Sazgal, a Catholic, had been drafted into the army. At the age of 6 months, Judith and her mother and 12 other members of her family were picked up by the members of the Hungarian Gendarmerie and forced to march to a large brickyard, which was their collection point for their deportation in cattle cars to Auschwitz. This was the very last phase of the deportation of almost all Hungarian Jews to the death camps. At the last minute, on July 8th, 1944, Judith was rescued from the brickyard by a non-Jewish family member and spent the rest of the war hiding with Mariska Herbeck, a distant relative. At the end of the war, her father came to Mariska to reunite with his daughter. Judith's mother and her entire family of 9 people, including children, were all killed in Auschwitz. Judith lights this candle in honor of her mother, Miss Rudolph Saskal, born as Irma Wise, her grandmother, Miss Mona Wise, born as Jonna Hoffman, her grandfather, Mr. Mona Wise, and 9 relatives on her mother's side of the family. Her message to young people is, don't be afraid to be Jewish. Next up is Zemfira Balyansi. Zemfira Balyansi was born in 1940 in Zhytomyr, Ukraine. In June 1941, as the Nazis approached Ukraine, Zemfira fled from Zhytomyr with her mother, sister, and grandparents to Bashkortostan in the Soviet Union. 3 of her uncles and her father were drafted into the Soviet army and died fighting the Nazis up at the front. Zemfira and her family survived and returned to Zhytomyr after the liberation of Ukraine. Zemfira is lighting this candle in honor of her father, Lazar Koifman, her mother, Brandla Breisler, her grandfather, Fagia Breisler, her grandfather, Aron Breisler, and her grandmother, Sirka Koifman. David Moskovic. David Moskovic was born in 1929 in Konec, Czechoslovakia. Konec at the time of his birth was in Czechoslovakia, but at the beginning of the war belonged to Hungary. The Hungarian Arrow Cross took control of the government and carried out the bidding of the Nazis, rounding up Jews from the outlying areas and gradually proceeding to Budapest. In April 1944, David, at the age of 14, and his family were arrested and sent to a ghetto in Ungvar, where they were forced to stay in an open-air brickyard. From there, they were transported by cattle cart to Auschwitz. 2 days later, David had his number tattooed on his arm, and he was marched to Camp Buna, a sub-camp of Auschwitz, and assigned to hard labor. He remained there until January of 1945. In January 1945, as the war came to an end, David was forced to march and then transported by an open-air train to Buchenwald. Many prisoners, among them his father, brother, perished on the train due to cold, hunger, and lack of sanitary conditions. On April 11, 1945, Buchenwald was liberated by the American Army. David lost his mother, father, brother, and 2 sisters in the Shoah. David lights this candle in honor of his mother, Brandel Moskovic, his father, Haskell Moskovic, his brother, Moshe Moskovic, and his sisters, Rivka Moskovic and Leah Moskovic, who all died in the Holocaust. David's message to young people: be kind to everyone. If you see someone being bullied, stand up for the person being bullied. It may change that person's life. Eva Visecki, or Vikesi. Eva Hollow Vikesi was born in Vienna in 1930. 3 years later, the family moved back to Budapest. Eva's father was a lawyer. However, due to the Nazi laws, he could not find employment as a clerk, or he could only find employment as a clerk at a law office. He was very popular because he offered free legal help to laborers. Her mother was a seamstress, pianist, and housewife. The family lived a secular life and considered themselves integrated into Hungarian and European society. Eva and her parents survived in Budapest. However, both sides of the extended family from the countryside were deported to concentration camps. Her parents were aware of the deportations in camps, but were in denial that it would ever reach Budapest. During World War II, Hungary was an ally of Germany. Then, in 1943, the government tried to unsuccessfully change sides. In 1944, Hitler responded by sending Eichmann to oversee mass deportations and murder of 400 Hungarian Jews, or 400,000. During the period, they sought refuge in one of the protected buildings established by the Swiss and Swedish embassies. Thanks to Wallenberg and Lodz, these buildings were incredibly cramped with other Jews from Budapest. Then, in January 1945, soldiers on horseback arrived, signaling the Soviet liberation of Hungary. After the war, Eva's father became Attorney General of the Hungarian Workers' National Insurance Board. Eva attended the University of Budapest to study architecture and engineering. At the university, she met her husband-to-be, Andrew Vikesi, also studying to be an architect. During the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, which was crushed by the Soviets, they immigrated with their daughter to Canada. Eva is lighting a candle honoring the memory of her father, Eugene Hollow, born Zilzer, and her mother, Elizabeth Gross, and her extended family, Hollow and the Gross family members, murdered in 1944. Her message to the younger generation is, study the past. It will help you define a future. Children should be taught more about the righteous Gentiles, individuals who risked everything for strangers just because it was the right thing to do. Fina Vivovsky. Fina Vivovsky, born Fina Golik, was born on September 19, 1933 in Korostan, Ukraine, near Zhytomyr. In 1941, Fina was forced to flee Korostan with her mother, grandmother, and sister as the Nazis began their bombardment of Ukraine. They had nothing with them but 2 small bags and 2 gas masks. After the long great-grandmother, Nozel Golik, and great-grandfather, Nozel Golik, and great-grandmother, Fagia Golik, who were shot by the Germans in Ukraine, uncle, Isaac Golik, grandfather, Shaina Fishban, grandmother, Meniha Fishban, aunt, Shura Fishban, stepfather, Mark Markov, mother-in-law, Hanna Vivovsky. Her message to young people is, I wish peace, only peace, and to take care of loved ones. A person should be valued for his human qualities and not his nationality or anything else. Bryna Wallace. The day before Yom Kippur in 1940, Bryna's father, Hessel Pukin, found a rabbi to marry his beloved Itke Gochman, and led 65 family members and close friends to the Kazany forest in Belarus, where they kept them alive for 3.5 years, and led 66 of them out of the forest in the spring of 1945. Bryna was the plus one, born in the forest on the fourth snowfall after Hanukkah in the last winter of the war. Bryna's first years of life were spent infecting the forest with hope, joy, and a promise of a good future. Having endured the unimaginable hardships of weather and starvation and disease in the forest, everyone welcomed her with literally open arms. She wasn't put down on her own even once in her first 6 months. Navigating the politics of the hostile partisan units, Nazi soldiers, and local anti-Semites who sought out opportunities to turn in Jews and watch their executions. Hessel kept his adopted family safe and protected from the elements with his sharp mind, expertise gained in serving the Polish army, and a friendship with a stray kitten that warned of approaching dangers. His kindness was impeccable, and his impeccable character endeared Hessel to everyone before the war. Jewish and not, so he was able to collect on favors from farmers and others for some emergency supplies that kept them alive. Together with her mother, Pearl, Itke kept everyone alive with the food that they made, to appear as if by magic, and a God-given intuition about people that more than once saved the entire group. Once liberated, Brina's parents stowed away on trains to Czechoslovakia. Extended family in the United States sent papers for the rest of the Gochmans to immigrate. However, they did not know that Itke had married, so the papers they made were for her in the wrong name, and there was none for her husband or baby girl. Itke watched her parents and siblings head for New York, staying behind with Hessel and Brina in a DP camp in Germany until they finally came to Canada in 1947. Itke secretly pregnant with Brina's brother, Earl, born in the same week as the State of Israel. Brina is lighting a candle in the memory of her namesake, Brina Gochman, her extended family murdered by the Nazis and anti-Semitic bystanders, and her beloved parents, Itke and Hessel Pukin.
Thank you. Well done. We now invite Chaya Ita Peters of Torah Day School to share a moving piece by child survivor Lena Allen Shore titled May the Flowers Grow. Through her words, we are reminded that even in the aftermath of unimaginable horror, beauty can bloom and hope can flourish.
The Cry from Warsaw. I remember a spring like the others before. I remember the rays of sunshine. I remember the fields covered with grass, the green fields, the flowers and gardens. I remember a bird, an enchanted bird, blessing its nest with a song. I remember young girls who smiled every night at their lovers on the eve of death. I remember one spring, a stream of blood, in 1943. I remember men, handsome and strong, long, long ago. My friend, do you understand? No, you will never understand. In my country of today, in this blessed country, it's hard to understand the suffering of yesterday. We have grown blind to suffering. I remember many kinds of men, some of them with the hearts of stone, some of them with the heart of a child. They did not want to die at the age of 20, 25 years ago. Millions were dying then, every day on the cross of hate. My brothers speak to me each night. From far away I hear their cry, the cry from Warsaw. Across my memories, their shadows appear. Their eyes are watching me. I see them in my heart. They live there. The children who never became men, the women who never became mothers. Men, hounded beings, who whispered, "We do not want to die." And I remember men who did not whisper at all, heroes without words. They carried their heads high, their hands strong as hammers, resolved to fight. Only their hands. For their minds knew that they could never win against the foe. They fought for dignity, and for one page in history to be written after their death. The page is still unwritten, for the conscience of the masters of history is sound asleep. I walk through the streets of Paris. I enter the opera. I listen to Faust by Gounod. The devil is on the stage is kind, very kind. Why did I see so many devils in my life? The devil is dancing. How many dancing devils have passed by on my journeys, laughing, grinning, cruel? But they could not take from me the love of life. My brothers in Warsaw love life as I do. They died because no one was listening to their cry. No one condemned their useless deaths. I walk through the streets of New York. I stroll down Fifth Avenue. I look at the windows full of light. They're too bright for me. In the middle of all the lights, I see the darkness of Mila Street. And I hear Chopin from far away. Chopin, played by my best friend. The Polonaise in A major follows me. It is mighty and great. My friend is dead, but his music is still in my ears. Chopin accompanies the cry from Warsaw. In Carnegie Hall, I close my eyes. I want to forget my past. I dream of the orchestra. The conductor is my master. In the enchanted world of harmony. An hour or two pass by, and suddenly the soloist, with one note of despair, reminds me of you. You who are gone, and you, and you. I travel around the world, at the La Scala in Milan. I search for the music of peace. The oratorio of Haydn is merciful for those who look for mercy, powerful for those who are powerful, human and deep for those who suffer, weeping along with me. In Vancouver, near the ocean, I watch the quiet waves and listen to their song. Time is passing, fast as wind. Where are the children who did not grow? The cry from Warsaw follows me. In Venice, in Calgary, in Los Angeles, in Geneva, in any street, any noise reminds me of other sounds of other streets where noise is mingled with the staccato of machine guns. They still rise up to heaven night and day. In San Francisco, on the Golden Gate Bridge, I ask myself, will I find my own bridge one day? The bridge between my past and my present? Yes, I will. When the ear of the world will touch the soil to kneel in repentance for what it has done. When the hands of the world will join to build a happier tomorrow. When the eyes of the world will see the truth. When the heart of the world will be strong enough to love. Then the cry from Warsaw will pass away.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Talia Gitter, and I went on the March of the Living 2 years ago in 2023. The march was always something that I had been interested in doing because I knew that it was important for me as a Jewish person to really see the atrocities that happened during the Holocaust. In my opinion, it's one thing to hear or to read about the concentration camps, but it's a completely different experience to be standing there witnessing what happened. I can say with complete certainty that the March of the Living changed who I am as a Jewish person more than anything else ever has. There's just something about standing in Auschwitz or Treblinka or the Warsaw Ghetto that is indescribable to someone who hasn't been there. About listening to survivor testimonials while in the barracks or walking through the forest where hundreds of Jews were murdered. It made me feel despair like I have never experienced before, and that feeling was overwhelming. But at the same time, I was experiencing it with people who were going through the exact same thing that I was. I had friends by my side that I could talk to, and I had a great relationship with my group leaders. I came away from the march with a different view on Israel and on Judaism. By being in Poland, I could really get a deeper understanding on why Israel is so important. I'm not sure I would have reached that opinion without having seen the concentration camps of Poland. I felt more secure in my Jewish identity, and I also felt a stronger sense of obligation to give back to my community, to advocate for Israel, and to actively stand up to anti-Semitism. On this Yom HaShoah, I remember the million of Jewish lives that were stolen. I mourn for those ones related to me, my great-grandparents, and I pay tribute to those who weren't, yet still are. I mourn too for the many that nobody knew, that will always remain nameless. I remember the names of the victims I lit candles for during my march, and I remember especially my friend Alex Buckman, a child survivor of the Holocaust who died almost exactly 2 years ago. They are the reasons that I can stand here today, and they are the reason I will continue to advocate for Jewish people and fight anti-Semitism everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you for those powerful words, Talia. And you might be interested to know that at this moment there are 11 high school students from the Ottawa area in Poland, and that earlier today on Yom HaShoah, they walked the solemn path from Auschwitz to Birkenau, retracing the steps of history as Talia has just described. The Jewish Federation of Ottawa is a proud participant in and funder of the March of the Living in order to help ensure future generations continue to learn and remember. So we're going to move now to the panel discussion. I'm going to introduce our three honored guests and then ask them to come forward. Our moderator this evening is Hernan Tesler-Mabe, a historian and scholar of Jewish thought, culture, and history. He is the associate professor and coordinator of the Jewish Studies program at Huron University College in London, Ontario. His research centers on modern Jewish history and culture across the diaspora with a focus on the intersection of Jewish culture and identity. He is also past president of the Association for Canadian Jewish Studies. Also have two artists with us. Raphael Goldchain is an award-winning photographer whose work delves into themes of memory, displacement, and identity. Born in Chile to Jewish parents of Eastern European descent, Raphael has spent decades reconstructing his family's story through visual art. His acclaimed series, I Am My Family, features staged self-portraits of himself as various relatives, recreating a lost family album and offering a haunting meditation on presence, absence, and legacy. His work is held in the permanent collections of the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the National Gallery of Canada, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And finally, Jacqueline Cote-Wool is a contemporary artist whose vibrant and deeply personal paintings explore the North American Jewish experience. Her exhibit, Growing Up Jewish Art and Storytelling, weaves together family narratives, cultural memory, and collective identity with warmth, wit, and poignancy. Through her vivid brushstrokes, Jacqueline documents the lives of Jewish immigrants and their descendants, the people, traditions, stories that form a living tapestry of survival and continuity. Please join me in welcoming our panel to the stage.
It's already on. They didn't have to show me how to turn this on. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I just want to begin by sharing just a little bit more about myself. So I too was born in I was born in Argentina. So we are Southern Cone people. That's one thing we have in common. The other thing that makes me feel like there's a bit of a homecoming here, sharing this. Sorry, Jacqueline. But the other thing that was not really mentioned here is that I lived in Ottawa for a number of years. I was a resident in Ottawa from 2002 until 2019, so almost 2 decades. And I do see some familiar faces here, and it feels very rewarding and enriching to be sharing this with you all. I know that this is a very difficult time, and I also know that this is a very difficult evening for many of us, especially at this time. So thank you all for making the effort to come out and to share what we're sharing tonight. So thank you. Now, the really key thing that we need to focus on here is art as remembrance, and the way that art somehow helps us understand the Holocaust, helps us understand the past, helps us understand ourselves. So that is what we're going to be focusing on. I have a few questions that I have prepared with my panelists here, with the artists here, and what we're going to do is sort of explore this, and I'll be working through these themes with you, and hopefully we'll all have a meaningful understanding of not only your own work, but also how we can be enriched by sharing in that work. So I'll start with the basics, the introductions, or the introductory part of this. What I'd like to do is queue up the first two paintings and or photographs here. There they are. And the first thing we're going to do is get a better understanding of who you are. If you can tell us a bit, we'll start with Jacqueline, and then we'll go to Raphael, of what your story is, how you got to where you are in your art, the genesis of your artistic engagement. Yeah, we'll start there. You have 3 to 5 minutes, and I'm keeping, no, I'll take as long as you need. Jacqueline, please.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for the very moving ceremony. I'm going to shift gears a little bit, a little lighter. 2 things you need to know about me. Growing up in Toronto, every single report card that I ever received from Owen Public Schools said the same thing year after year. Jackie talks too much, and she's good at art. The other thing that was a very important part of my life was that in our comfortable Jewish-ish Toronto neighborhood, we were considered the big Jews. My parents survived the Holocaust as children. They were the founding members of our conservative movement synagogue, which we attended every week. We kept Shabbat, we kept kosher, and we observed all the holidays. And I mostly liked it. Sometimes it conflicted with Halloween, not so happy. But for the most part, I grew up in what we're now calling, I guess, the golden age of Jewish life. I'm a product of the 70s, 80s, and so I wanted to start with Visitors' Day at Camp Masad because, to me, one of the most seminal moments of being Jewish was going to summer camp. And that was something that I wanted to capture in one of my paintings, which we'll get into the genesis of how I got there also in the next slide. Raphael, your turn.
Can I be shorter than you?
Sure.
My story is a bit of a meandering story and starts somewhere close to where Hernan's story starts in the Southern Cone. But I think I'll jump forward to the moment where I'm already a photographer with a degree in photography from a Toronto University. And I spent some time traveling back to Latin America, particularly Mexico, because simple reasons, my family lives there, so I want to see them. So I go there and I bring my camera with me. And in the context of doing that, and this is now in the early 80s, I'm finding out that the pictures that I'm making there, and I'm very serious about my photography at this point, you know, at 23, 24, you are very serious about stuff. I'm finding that the pictures are particularly good, unexpectedly. And what's making them good is that I somehow have a connection to the world that I'm photographing, a personal, emotional, intellectual connection. I have an interest in the politics, but this is not where I grew up. This is Mexico. So it's an entry through language and culture, but it's also a discovery of a country I did not grow up in simultaneously. So I spent a few years doing that. This had nothing to do with my Jewish identity. Occasionally I went to shul, and that made me feel good. The rest of the time I had the camera in my hand and I was making pictures all over. I also extended my trips to Central America. This is a period of about 10 years of doing this. During that time, I had a couple of Canada Council grants that I was very, very happy to have gotten and very lucky on the strength of the work that I was doing in support from my peers. And so I had the privilege of taking a year off my job, which was working in a hospital as a hospital photographer. And spending all the time traveling in Mexico, in Guatemala, in El Salvador, in Honduras, hanging out with the press photographers, and all those countries were under turmoil, civil wars, insurgencies, and so on. And I suppose I was thinking I was playing the role of a war photographer, although I was petrified, so I didn't do it. But I traveled to all those places and I photographed in all those places. At about 1990, all of a sudden something that happens to artists overtook me. And it's a terrible thing. I'm done. I've said everything I had to say about this in my life. And what do I do now? And that is a terrible question for artists, right? And so you have to change things up a bit. So I decided to move from the field, where I had been photographing people the majority of the time, into the studio. I was fascinated by the studio. I had friends who photographed in the studio all day, and I wanted to do portraiture, formal portraiture. I wanted to learn how to do that. But I didn't have any models. And I didn't want to walk around asking people to come to my studio. So instead, I did two things. One of them is I went back to school, which I highly recommend at any age.
I second that, by the way.
And I did my MFA at York University for 2 years. And during that time, I took the time to refresh and reinvigorate my artistic work, and I used myself as a model for two reasons. One of them is I'm very available. And the other one is I'm really cheap. So I started photographing myself in the studio. At this time, my wife and I have a 5-6-year-old son who is learning how to read, and his curiosity is immense, and he wants stories, and he wants to engage with me. And I find out that, you know, it's a little complicated to explain to him what a Latin American Jewish Canadian is. It's a bit of a mixture. And so that was my topic in the MFA course. I'm going to make photographs of myself that in some way incorporate these three cultures, these three backgrounds, these three languages and histories. That lasted for about 6 months. And then after that, I found out that what I was doing was making photographs of myself and creating fictional characters out of my memory and imagination. Memory big, imagination not so much. And at some point, I realized that there was one person in my past that I remembered real well because he had lived with my family for decades after my grandmother passed away. And he was my maternal grandfather. I remembered him very well, and I thought maybe I can perform as him for the camera. And so that picture is the result of that photographic session and that process, and it is really the catalyst for everything that came afterwards.
Fascinating. Thank you very
Sorry
much.
it took so long.
No, that circuitous routes are the best ways to get there. And I think there's something that, so just to explain a little bit, what we've done here, I have a couple of introductory questions, and then we have a series of questions that relate more directly to the Holocaust. But the second introductory question I had, and I just want to sort of connect to something obviously that you both spoke to, which is trying to understand Jewish identity, right? And in particular, I'm interested in also how art projects that identity, or captures that identity, if you will. And I'll just say very quickly, a couple of years ago, I taught a course on Jewish art at my university, and it was half of the class were young students, and the other half were more mature students who were auditing the course. But that's a euphemism, but I think you all get it. But what we all had in common was an attempt to try to explore and understand what Jewish art was. But the interesting thing to me, and this is why this question resonates, was when I got to Marc Chagall, and I think most of us in this room know who Marc Chagall is, and would perhaps consider him a Jewish artist, at least I do, everybody said, that's not Jewish art. He's not a Jewish artist. And I was taken very much aback. So I wanted to actually, now that I have artists on the stage, ask here, what is Jewish art and what makes your art Jewish? So, and I think we have a second slide that speaks to that. Jacqueline, do you want to?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
So let's fast forward. Childhood, big Jews. Now I live in Chicago. funnily enough, we are still the big Jews in my community. So anybody who knows me knows that I am both deeply involved in my Jewish community, very involved with my art, but these two things never came together. My art and my Judaism were separate, in large part because people used to ask me, Jackie, why don't you make Jewish art? You're so involved in the Jewish community. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to make? Rabbis? Like, I grew up in a home where rabbi art was considered Jewish art. We had a portrait of this Hasidic rabbi that hung in the TV room of our family home, and he presided over many episodes of The Love Boat and Fantasy Island, and I thought, well, why don't I just paint my rabbi? And so there it is, Rabbi Feder. He had no beard, he wore turtlenecks, he ran a very modern synagogue in Toronto. In my memory of him, he lived this, he created this environment in our synagogue where you could be completely identified with your Jewish life and completely identified with your secular life. There was no conflict for him. All the women there looked like Gloria Steinem to me. And so I just thought this was such an important expression for me, a modern take, a Canadian or North American take on Jewish art. Take that old-fashioned rabbi painting and bring it up to my personal experience of what Jewish art should look like.
Thank you very much. Raphael, to you, please.
Thank you. I kind of a little bit of a different take on this because I consider that an open question that probably doesn't have a definitive answer. And it takes different forms when contemplating different kinds of art as to whether the art is Jewish or not. So this is from ChatGPT. Just trying to be current. At its core, Jewish art refers to creative works that reflect the beliefs, traditions, history, or lived experiences of Jewish people. We can leave it there, but I'm going to go on because I'm blonde. Sorry. I have notes, and they're a curse because you have to read them. A conventional understanding of Jewish art involved religious and folk art, illuminated Haggadot, Torah ornaments, candlesticks, Chanukiot, as well as modern painted rabbis and images of Jewish religious life, of Jewish holiday symbols, or nostalgic images of Eastern European Jewish life before or during the Shoah. This is quite different than talking about art by Jewish artists. I'm thinking of many Jewish artists whose work, when you look at it, doesn't particularly come across as carrying a Jewish theme or a Jewish meaning. Philip Guston, for example, the very, very controversial art involving figures that look very much like Klan members with a K. Is there a Jewish angle to that? And the fact that he was a Jewish artist, you could build an argument there, right? But it's powerful art, whether it's Jewish or not.
Right.
And then there's a lot of art by Jewish art doesn't fall into these genres of art, craft, Torah ornaments, and so on, Chanukiot. Perhaps I view the label of Jewish art as a bit restrictive, a bit of a straitjacket. As an artist, I do. Jewish artists often use modern or contemporary visual languages to articulate aspects of their Jewish identity and experience in ways that do not recur, do not use the stereotypes, and that speak to audiences outside the Jewish world as well as within the Jewish world. For example, my image on screen right now, featuring myself dressed and made up to perform as a young woman who happens to represent my mother's aunt or my great aunt. So here is a Jewish artist in drag, not a rabbi, right? And it's a different kind of visual language. Is it a Jewish theme? I think we'll find out as we talk about relationship between art and the Holocaust.
Yeah.
Because she was my mother's, the person represented, was my mother's beloved aunt, the one that she was closest to, and she perished in the Holocaust. She didn't make it out of Poland. So
Thank you. And I mean, I think there's two things here. One is obviously this idea of Jewish art being prescriptive or too defined. This is a tension that Jewish artists have to sort of struggle against, right? But being aware of, obviously, this is a further discussion that we can have, but given the context that we're in right now, we're going to shift gears into talking about art as Holocaust remembrance and what place it serves. So if we can, again, cue the next slide there. And the question to both of you again is, what is the place of art in Holocaust remembrance, and how does it help us? Does it help us understand the Holocaust, or is this not as critical a part of that memory building or understanding? And I don't know if you, Jacqueline, want to go, or Raphael?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
So for me, when I started this project, I work off photographs. And as an artist, just before I started doing anything Jewishly themed, I would go to my mom's, and she's got a shoebox full of photographs. I kind of comment, you know, from 1947 until 1990, whatever, there's probably about 1,000 pictures in my parents' collection of photographs. That's it. And I think last year I took about 12,000 pictures, you know, a lot of like, what did I eat and where did I travel? So the photographs really meant something to us as children. And as a child of Holocaust survivors, one of the things that struck me as so mysterious was the past, the black and white pictures. We had so few, and the images felt kind of haunted, you know, like who are these people? No one's talking about them. What's going on in these pictures? So what you have here is one of the rare photos that came with my parents from Europe. My father's in the front row in the desk with the little navy blazer. And it's called Cheder in the DP camp. And I remember seeing this photo as a child and knowing that the kids were about 14 years old, but not understanding why they looked so old. I just couldn't, I would just study it. I didn't my parents tried to shield us a lot from the Holocaust stories. They didn't share that much. And so there was a lot of what we've been discussing a lot. It's like Swiss cheese, you know, like there's holes in the story and you're trying to fill them. So I think a lot of my painting journey has become this desire to fill holes, to understand what's the family history. The other piece that I think those of us who descend from Holocaust survivors understand is that for a long time, our history was sort of behind the Iron Curtain. It was just a door that slammed shut, and there was nothing to connect us to the past. And so if you're a person like me, or a person like Raphael, who's interested in history and your own family story, you felt cheated. Like there was so many missing links. So I love the old photos. In any case, when I was painting this series, the Growing Up Jewish series, I wanted to look at this moment in my father's life and, you know, marvel at it. He'd missed his entire education, the whole thing. And this was the only single year of school he ever had. And he would tell me when I was little, when he'd show me this picture, I loved school so much, that year meant so much to me. And I think that was actually a responsa to my report cards, because I didn't take school so seriously. And he wanted me to appreciate what an education meant. And so for him, he had 1 year, then he came to Canada, and he did night school, and he found a really wonderful tutor who helped him matriculate the high school exams. And he got a degree at Concordia, and he managed to get to law school. So it was just this idea of, you know, growth as a human being, desire, like the urge to make more for yourself, what Canada provided. And so there's a lot of tributes going on in this painting. It was a very haunting experience to make. So.
Thank you. And it's really interesting that you're talking about the time after.
Yes.
Right, and this is something, like you said, this absence of memory, and we'll be developing that theme, because this is really, really critical, I think, to how art can serve a critical role in Holocaust
Right.
remembrance.
Right, and as I looked at those faces, like I was, as an adult, when I painted this, my daughter was 14. And I just was comparing those faces to my daughter's face, and I'm thinking, what did these children witness? What did they experience? Who did they lose? How did life turn out for them? Did they rebuild? Were they optimistic people? You know, that was a transitional space, the DP camps, and people just scattered all around the world from there.
Absolutely. Raphael, you've chosen to not portray yourself on this particular slide. If you could explain that, as well as answer this question of the place of art in Holocaust remembrance, please.
Yeah, I suppose I have a kind of an abstract philosophical framework to deal with this question. Response to your question, Hernan. Y muchas gracias por la pregunta.
De nada.
You know, this is a monument by British sculptor named Rachel Whitered. This monument sits in front of the Jewish Museum in Vienna in Judenplatz. Has been there for a number of years, and it was the subject of some controversy, or a lot of controversy when it was first built. And anybody who knows Vienna would probably know that there's a lot of people that are constantly at war with each other over there with different opinions, and this was one of the subjects. As an aside, I should mention that as the construction of the monument progressed and the renovation of the museum, they found about 30 feet below the place where the monument sits, medieval synagogue, 11th to 12th century. And so there is a passage that you can actually enter through the museum and go deep into the earth and enter the archaeological site, which is a cavern, basically. Quite an amazing place. But why did I choose this rather than one of my own pictures is because it articulates something that Jackie said here too, is the idea of absence, and I also call it a void in the middle of European civilization. I always thought that, you know, a void of 3 million people in Poland is not something that one kind of casually observes and moves on from. It's something that is literally eating that country from inside. The Shoah is many people say, it's unfathomable from our point of view, from my point of view. It is beyond rational understanding. And while I say documents and established and irrefutable facts are indispensable in combating Holocaust denial and through writing and legal processes, art usually functions at a different band, a different frequency, or a different register than historical writing, fiction or nonfiction, and perhaps it's more akin to poetry. And it focuses on the experiential. How do you feel when you stand, what do you think when you stand in front of a monument such as Whitered's? And that, I think, is a range of complex emotional responses that, in a unique way, we think about the Holocaust and its aftermath. I'm going to speak for a little longer, is that okay?
No, continue, please, and then we'll move to the next.
The monument commemorates the murder of 65,000 Austrian Jews. And what the monument is about really is that void. The room inside the memorial is sealed. You can't go in there. And the monument stands in stark contrast to the traditional architecture of Viennese buildings around it. It feels kind of stark, kind of brutal, and kind of uncomfortable. It's out of place. It's out of time. It's unhinged. It's sort of like the specter of Hamlet's father that shows up in Hamlet to tell Hamlet that the world is off its hinges and that he has to go back and fix it. And he's hardly recognizable. He's in armor. The armor is the walls of this document, of this monument. The memorial is closed. It's inaccessible. It's a windowless room. It's an inside-out library. It's built of concrete casts of books turned inwards, except we can't go in there and read what's written on the spines of the books. We don't know what the books are. The walls have really fallen away, leaving the concrete casts of the books, which are turned inwards inside the room. The nameless library with books turned inwards with stories that we cannot read symbolizes the inaccessible world that was lost.
I know I'll pick up on that because I think that's really, really critical here. And I'm going to try to sort of put together a few of the questions. We, believe it or not, this isn't the first time that we've spoken to one another. We tried to sort of think about what elements we shared and what interests we had in this really, really profound and tremendously weighty topic, right? But one of the things that obviously we talked about before was the weight of the past, the absences. I believe you used the term Swiss cheese, the memory that we can't find. There are these holes that are there. But what I'd like to do is just sort of skip ahead, if we can, with the PowerPoint, because there's a question that we talked about, which was this this idea of how did you learn about the particular people that you portrayed in your work, right? Have you learned anything particular about yourselves in so doing? And what, if you want to share any of that, that would be wonderful. And this would be the slide. For Jacqueline, it is a dignified background, is the painting. And for Raphael, it's self-portrait as Don Marcos Jose Goldchain Lieberman the Older. So Jacqueline, do you want to tell us a little bit about who this person is and what you discovered and what you learned about yourself and your connection to this past?
Yes. So I'm going to take you back to Owen Public School. One of the assignments that I hated more than anything was the dreaded family tree, please bring in a family heirloom assignment. I, as a child of Holocaust survivors, couldn't do that assignment. It was like we could put just a few names on the list, and I would come to school, and I remember there was this boy in my class, Teddy, who was wearing his great-grandfather's headdress. He was First Nations. And I looked like I didn't do the work, because I asked my mom, like, you know, do we have any names of great-grandparents? She said, well, there was Godel Mangel. And I said, oh, tell me about him. And she said, well, he died in the Holocaust. And that was it. And otherwise, it was blank. Like, there were no names. And I said, well, do we have something that I can bring to school that's old? And she said, we don't have anything that's old. Everything we have, we acquired when we moved to Canada. So at that time, our stuff was like 30 years old. So I was embarrassed that I had nothing to bring to school. So fast forward to today, I'm working on this project. The internet is an amazing space. And I thought, well, what would happen if I Googled my great-grandfather's name? So the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum has this incredible record, keeping program that I think they upload names like every single day. More names are uploaded. So I type in his name and uploads a photograph of my great-grandfather. It was his identity card from the Krakow ghetto, yes. So I couldn't believe it. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, you're not gonna believe it. I found a picture of your grandfather, Godel. And so my mom looks at the picture and she flips out. She's like, the last time I saw him, I was 5 years old. So she told me what happened to him. I said, Mom, you've gotta tell me. Like, the time is passing. I have to know what happened to him. So she told me the unspeakable. She said Godel was taken by the Nazis, and they did science experiments on him. They injected him with gasoline, and he was a victim of Dr. Mengele. So of course she wasn't going to tell me this when I was a child. I mean, and I certainly wasn't going to come to school and be the Grim Reaper and tell people horrifying stories. So I just lived with all these empty spaces in the family history. So there I was. I looked at this photo, and I thought, this is too important. I have to do something. He doesn't have a grave. I mean, there's no monument. He never had a funeral, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He just disappeared. So I created this painting like out of something that was created in an act of hatred, and I recreated it in an act of love, and I painted him. But the background part is interesting. That's the wallpaper from my dining room. And that's where great-grandfather Godel's family members observe Judaism every week, where we have Shabbat. And that's the heirloom. Shabbat, our traditions, who we are, what we believe, what we continue to follow, that's the heirloom.
The connections.
So, the connection. So it was probably one of the most powerful things I've ever done in my life.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
Raphael, you have weighty shoes to fill.
Sorry.
It's a hard act to follow. First of all, I should say I'm not, the son of Holocaust survivors. Neither are my parents. My mother was born in Poland, but she left as a little girl and went to South America. My father was born in Argentina and ended up in Chile some years later. So if I'm going to reference in my work people who were survivors or victims, I'm going back to the cheese that Jacqueline was talking about, a Swiss cheese, where in a way the holes are bigger than the cheese. I severely lacked the stories that you have. My parents did not ask questions of their parents. And so the last person I would have been able to ask any questions of was my paternal grandfather, whom I represent and perform as in this picture. And he died in 1959 when I was 6 years old. And he was somewhat of an inaccessible person. He was a writer who has a Yiddish typewriter. He wrote in Yiddish. I wish I had that Yiddish typewriter, but somehow it disappeared into the dust of history. And so my father would be the repository of all the knowledge about him. And over the years, I've certainly asked a lot of questions. So I do know a lot about him. Now, why did I make this picture? Because this picture is based on a picture of my grandfather made by my father. And as a bit of a nudnik, as an artist, or nebesh, did I use that word too? A little
Nebesh.
bit, a nerd?
Nudnik's good too.
I wanted to play with the idea of time and portraiture, and how many moments are referenced in a picture, and what overshadows a picture. In many of my self-portraits, the Holocaust is like a shadow overhanging, but the subject of the pictures is not the Holocaust. Yeah. But in this picture, there are many moments that I thought were playful. One of them is the moment at which I, in the studio, in the present, pose or perform as my grandfather, but in that moment is also the moment at which my grandfather posed for my father. Right. So at least there's two moments in there, kind of a fold in time that the photograph in a way involves.
This is fascinating. I'll just close with this. Excuse me as I lose my voice. You talked about connections. You're talking about simultaneity. And really how the past is not the Jewish past. It continues. It's the present. It is the rituals that we reanimate, that help us reanimate ourselves. And we had many longer discussions amongst ourselves, and unfortunately we don't have the time to convey all of that.
May I say something about the past for a minute? Sorry, I'm interrupting her now.
Please.
In English, I should do it in Spanish, but never mind.
Very quickly.
There's a very poetic and poignant short piece of writing by the great Jewish philosopher Walter Benjamin. In his last book, Thesis on the Philosophy of History. And in it, he talks about a drawing by the great Swiss artist Paul Klee. And the drawing is a very simple drawing, very abstract, very almost crude, of an angel. Benjamin's interpretation of the angel is that the angel is standing at the doors of paradise. And he's looking at the past. And he sees the past as wreckage upon wreckage, catastrophe, a huge pile of wreckage. And the angel is an empathetic angel. He wants to go back it wants to go back and repair all the damage. It's a yearning, it's a longing to repair. I think both Jacqueline and I are in that position.
Absolutely.
But there's a wind blowing out of paradise, and it's got caught in his wings, and it's propelling the angel forward. And so there's a stasis there between the yearning and the desire to go back to the past and address it. And at the same time, the natural process of living forward.
To rebuild.
Yeah.
Wonderful. With those words, we'll end our panel this evening. I want to thank our guests, our artists, friends, whose work you can access. You can look at it on their websites. We'll obviously have these up for a little bit, but it's time for us to move on and continue the ceremony of remembrance. And I thank you all for paying attention this evening, and I'll relinquish the stage. Thank you.
Thank you to the panelists for sharing your insights and your artistry. And for those who'd like to see more, there is art actually displayed just outside of this room.